Hey friends, welcome back. So today I'm going to do a review on the Entente Larifari frames. In today's video, what I'm going to do is talk about the things that I like about the frames, things that I maybe don't like or didn't prefer about the frames, who I think the frames are best for, and give you my final thoughts. Let's go through an overview of these frames. So they are made in Bavaria, and they are basically CNC machined out of a block of really hard plastic, similar to the angled soles. They come in 3 different frame lengths. So you got a 252, 264, and a 276 millimeter wheel spacing. You can put in 60 millimeter maximum wheels on the outside or 64 millimeter if you do some dremeling of your sole plates. And then for the interior, you can put up to a 50 millimeter wheel, and then it is intended as a anti-rocker frame. So the designer of this frame used to design frames for Kaiser. So, you know, there's some similarities there to like the Kaiser Fluid 4s. One thing that's really nice is that they come with single-sided axles, so it basically has a shape on one side, and so you just need one Allen key on the other side to tighten the axle up. And I bought these back in December for 160 US dollars or 145 euros plus shipping. I want to say that they ended up being around $200 all said and done. But given the current state of our shipping and political climate, I have no idea what these would cost with tariffs. So it's got to be a lot more expensive just within the last 8 months. So I just want to point something out today. I bruised the ends of my big toes when I was skating the stock in MyFit Prime liners and the Icons. So I've taken about 4 days off, and today's the first day my feet feel good inside the skates. But I'm trying to take it easy and not take like bigger drops on it, just because I still feel it a little bit with every landing, and it is pretty sore. So, you know, definitely trying to stay to lower stuff just to showcase, you know, my style of skating with the frames. So let's talk about the things that I liked about these frames. You know, so first off, I really like one-sided axles on frames because it makes taking the frame bolts in and out so much easier and being able to maintain them like when you're skating. I also really enjoyed the machine tolerance on these. I found wheels dropped in really easy and didn't have to worry about trying to pry the walls open to drop the wheels in like you do with some frames. And, you know, another thing is, you know, just how these frames performed. So I noticed that they did slide really well, and you know, it's got a wide H block that's not too deep, but then it's got really nice sidewall chamfers, so it made for locking in to my tricks and the way that I skate really comfortable and really easy, and I didn't feel that they required a whole lot of break-in to feel comfortable on them. You know, they did have some just machined edges, and you know, it only took a couple sessions for those to wear down, and you know, that really helps with how smooth they slide, you know, because you basically break those in. I did find that these were very durable. They wore in, you know, to the appropriate amount, so that way I was comfortable when skating, but it wasn't wore in too quickly where, you know, I was concerned about how long these frames would last. You know, I typically skated these at skate parks, and I go to a ton of different skate parks all over Colorado, and I skate these on ledges, rails, coping, transition. So I really put it through the work, and I've been skating them off and on for the last 6 months, and I've tried them on the Icon AG15s, the Faction Plastics, the Icon ACT10, which is, you know, what I got it set up on now, and then I also skated them for a little bit on the Echo Verbs. You know, because the frames are made out of a harder plastic, I did note that, you know, it does give you a little bit more of a shock. But after my sessions, I wasn't feeling like my knees were dead like I've had, you know, when I've skated aluminum frames. So I think, yeah, they are hard, but it's not hard enough where it causes me pain or aches from skating. So, you know, if it was any harder, it probably would. So for me, you know, I found that was really a pro, because having a good frame that doesn't hurt my knees goes a long way. You know, I did find, because these have bridging thicker plastic, they are very stiff, which means that they're very responsive and they don't flex as you're skating or under your weight, or if you're on ledges. Like, the only flex you would get out of these is if you have them attached to basically the bottom of a soft boot, but that wouldn't be a problem with the frame. That would be an issue with the mounting of the skate. You know, I noticed skating these that, you know, I didn't stick on grinds really at all. You know, I tend to make sure everything is waxed, but even then it's, you know, they felt good. You know, I'm not going out and skating like rusty metal that hasn't been waxed in like 3 years. But, you know, compared to like some other stuff I've skated, these slid really well. Let's see. You know, I should mention that these are the medium, and I am skating them on the 42-43 Icon ACT. Just for reference, and how I like my wheels is basically center of the wheels to be lined up kind of with the front and the back of the skate. So, you know, that's generally a good rule of thumb for perfect balance for me. I like the H-block because it lines up really well with the backslide plate, and I think it's really good, high quality hardware. So let's talk about the things that I didn't like or maybe didn't prefer with these frames. You know, so the H-block is really wide, and then the side chamfers, you know, are relatively deep, but you don't have the deepest H-block in the middle. And what I found is when skating ledges, because of the way that the anti-rockers are placed, is that these little guys would drag on ledges a lot. And, you know, it's not so bad where it like screwed up my tricks, but I just felt like because the anti-rockers are dragging and you're not skating on the frame, it tends to slow you down a little. You know, the thicker walls, you know, there's a trade-off there, because while it adds durability and stiffness to the skate, it also takes away if you are skating something on the narrower side. So I know when I was skating the Echo Verbs with these frames, they already had a little bit narrower of a sole plate, and then, you know, skating these frames on them takes away, and it just makes locking in on top sides just a little more difficult. But again, you know, if you're pretty seasoned and you know what you're doing, you can like learn it and figure it out. But it is something to be aware of, that there's a trade-off there. I found that, you know, these axles, while they're good quality, they do tend to vibrate loose a little bit when skating, especially if I was skating like on a little more rough surfaces. And when skating on rough ledges, the harder of a material you have that you're grinding on, and the rougher the surface, you don't really have forgiveness in the material. So basically what you find is, instead of it being able to kind of absorb the shock and just like ride through it, it almost bounces and skips, and that causes like vibration through the frame. And, you know, it's not painful, but it's something that I noticed. You know, because this is machined, you know, they do have really good tolerance for setting up, but because the frame is so stiff, the plastic doesn't really move when you tighten the axles. So I found, when I was skating like some wheels in these, if you don't have a wheel that fits the width of this frame, it can sound a little clacky. And, there's not really anything you can do about it other than just making sure you have wheels with the widest cores that fit within this frame. As far as the price point on these frames too, I could see that as being a huge turnoff to people. I was really interested in these frames, so I didn't mind paying that. It was kind of a Christmas present to myself. But, again, I can see where, some people may not want to pay for that because the price of these is almost the price of a new skate. One other thing that I kind of noticed when skating these is, so I've skated a lot of frames, and, while these rode well and slid well, I don't know that the type of plastic made it better than skating any other type of frame that's really on the market, just because there's so many good frames out there at really good price points. So, I don't know that the improvement of the material really made that big of a difference. I, really like the concept on these, and but again, I just felt that there was a negligible difference in how fast and how well they slid. The other thing to note too is because the walls and the material is thicker, which it kind of has to be because it's machined, and so you got to prevent it from cracking by using a thicker material. I found that on some skates I rode these on, I actually had to use longer frame bolts in order to secure the frames, because if you don't use something longer, it basically, you get less embedment in the receiver, and then the frames tend to, or the frame bolts tend to back out a little bit, and they get a little rattly, and so you got to tighten it up in the middle of a session. So, but I mean, it's kind of a minor thing, but still something. So what are my final thoughts on these? I think they are a solid frame that slides really well, but they do come at an expensive price point. They have a nice oversized H-block, which helps with locking in and staying locked in on grinds, but I did find that the anti-rockers did drag on ledges. You've got thicker walls on the frames, which is good because that means it's going to give you a long time durability. Trade-off is that if you've got narrower sole plates, then that eats up some of that sole plate width. And then because these are machined, you get very good construction tolerances, so you don't have to pry the walls open to try and set them up. So it does give you a nice easy setup, although I will say the downside is that on some skates you have to use longer frame bolts, so if you don't have those on hand, it can be a little bit of trial and error to try and find them. Alright, so let's talk about who I think these frames are for and who they're not for. First I'd say they're not for someone who's looking to skate flat. Entente makes some flat frames. I don't know what the experience with these would be flat, but I imagine the wheels would stick out pretty bad and give you wheel bite. And then I would also say that, if you're looking at being cheap on skate parts, this is probably not the frame for you. I'd say, who this frame is basically money bags, so you got extra cash laying around, you're looking for some quality frames. And then, someone who's looking for a really good anti-rocker frame that's made of solid, durable materials that's going to last a long time. Alright, well that wraps up today's review on the Entente Larifari frames. Got any questions, comments, feel free to reach out to me. I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks all for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.